Jared Scott is an award-winning filmmaker, director, and a co-founder at PF Pictures. A native of Columbus, Ohio, Mr. Scott currently resides in New York City. The Age of Consequences is Mr. Scott's most recent film, but he also wrote, directed, and produced Requiem for the American Dream, a New York Times critic pick that tackled the issue of the concentration of wealth and power at the top. His other works focus on climate issues and political polarization. His work is critically acclaimed, with his film Disruption being ranked the #1 film for social change, according to Films for Action, and his film The Artificial Leaf premiered at Sundance with films by Morgan Spurlock, amongst others. Mr. Scott has also worked on television, directing segments for BBC Earth and BBC America. An accomplished speaker, Mr. Scott has delivered talks on ABC, NBC, Huffington Post Live, Al Jazeera, and in a number of prominent universities. And now, writer and director and producer of the film, Mr. Jared Scott, will be with us shortly via Skype. Thank you.
I can, yeah. Beautiful. Well, thanks so much.
Jared, do you want to just say a few things to start us off?
Absolutely. So I was supposed to be, and I got caught up in a snowstorm here in the Northeast, so I apologize. I was at the airport for about 8 to 10 hours today, so I tried my best. But thanks so much for coming out and taking time to watch this film. It's a little hard to, is there a way to mute me as I'm talking so I don't hear it in my headphones? It kind of sounds like the voice of God, not a good God.
We'll try our best. Should we get the first question?
Absolutely.
Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you. I really enjoyed the film. One of my questions is that you went through kind of how the US Congress is dealing with climate change and their perceptions on it, but you didn't necessarily touch on sort of the prevalence of the climate change denial within our government system as well as like some of the people. And I guess, why do you think a lot of people want to deny climate change? Do they actually believe that climate change isn't real, or do they just have the interests of the oil companies and other big polluters in mind?
Okay, thanks for that. I was only able to catch a little bit of it, but I think I don't know, I'll take a stab at it here. I think I'll try to fill in the blanks. Well, I think first off, we set out to make this film because there's a lot of people throughout the country and throughout the world that just don't recognize that this is a problem. They just don't recognize that climate change is a problem. It's either something esoteric environmental issue that they just can't quite grasp, or perhaps it truly is an inconvenient truth and they just dismiss it. Perhaps there's other emotional, psychological reasons. Perhaps they worship at the altar of the free market and they can't bear to think that the mechanisms that brought the world such great wealth can be also problematic. There could be a lot of issues there why people can't come to terms with this issue. I think when you look at like what organizers call the spectrum of allies, you look at your active opposition, your passive opposition, your neutral, your passive allies, and your active allies. The goal of any organizer, they'll tell you, is to move everybody one pie chart to the left, one pie chart closer to being an active ally. You leave your active opposition alone because they're not going to do anything. So when we set out to make this film, we just thought that if we could just Because we've made films for the active allies. We've made films about climate change before that have talked about 2 degrees Celsius and the fossil fuel industry and about taking to the streets and about a carbon fee. I think that this time around, we really wanted to focus on our neutral friends and maybe our passive friends and maybe even some of our passive opposition that just needs some other way, some other entry point into this issue. For you, it might be the fossil fuel industry as public enemy number 1, and therefore you might be involved in the Worcester divestment movement. For somebody else at a chapter in Cleveland, could be working for the Citizens Climate Lobby, and their goal is to try to do everything they can to get a carbon fee enacted. I think we all have different entry points. We all have different groups that we can engage in. But with this film, just the starting baseline has to be if there is a problem, because if people don't recognize there's a problem, they're not going to be inclined to find a solution. And using this perspective, using this lens, look, I'm from Ohio, I'm from Columbus. When I'm home for Thanksgiving, I sit down with people that don't buy this. And I can say, all sorts of things like the fossil fuel industry and Rex Tillerson and da-da-da, or I can get into the science and I can talk about the chemical composition of the atmosphere and what we've done. And sometimes that just goes over people's heads. But if I say, hey, you know what? There are these admirals and these generals, and these people at the Pentagon talking about this, all of a sudden some people's ears perk up. And that's why we wanted to make this film. It's also a way to extend an olive branch out to certain people, especially in Ohio. And we see all sorts of people that have different views. If we can use this way of talking about this issue with certain people, if this can resonate with certain people, including ourselves, then I think that it's just another way, it's another entry point, right, to get this on the map. And I think that, film is a great avenue for it, right? Because it's a low entrance barrier. I mean, everybody in this room is probably used to watching movies, right? We do it all the time, whether it's at home or elsewhere. I mean, anybody, no matter what your political persuasion is, what your age, your gender, your faith, you can sit down and watch a film for 80 minutes. And it's a really low entrance barrier. So this message, this film, the idea is just to try to get under people and give this perspective a little push. So perhaps in some places there can be a kitchen conversation that didn't exist before, it wouldn't have existed before about climate change. I only heard half of what you said, so hopefully that touched upon it in some way.
Is it going right? Oh, okay. You said something about how we rely on autocracies for oil and stuff, right? Like Saudi Arabia and that stuff. So I was curious, as we rely on more less fossil fuel driven things, will we have to rely on those countries less? And it wouldn't drive as much as our diplomacy does with them.
Copy that. I'll take a stab at that. I believe the crux of that was it's echoey, so it's tough to hear that there's certain countries where if we had less of a dependency on fossil fuels, then perhaps we'd be less inclined to have certain relationships with certain countries. So you see our relationships in the Middle East, our relationship with Saudi Arabia in particular. I think that instead of maybe going down, a certain avenue with that, I'd like to try to keep it in the frame of the film, being that, look, as Michael Breen said, Michael Breen, who's a former Army captain who was very prominently featured in the film, one of the great voices. He talks about those decisions, how geopolitical decisions are made, and in that, I think we have to realize that it just makes us less safe when we are trying to work with a number of countries to deal with something like fossil fuels. Petroleum in particular, it comes from very volatile places around the world, And as he points out, there's a lot of money that goes into just protecting the flow of that oil. And bear in mind that's a commodity, it's a private commodity. It's your tax dollars going to protect a private commodity. But a lot of that, the way that fossil fuels is baked into the economics of the world, and how all these things are interconnected, it's not something that increases our that makes us safer as a nation, and of course there's all sorts of reasons beyond just the fact that climate change is an issue to get off it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess to answer your question, just no doubt we would be, there's no doubt if we were producing the majority of our energy within our own borders, that would make us a safer country.
Is this working? Okay. I just kind of wanted to compliment you on the amount of nuance that you approach the issue with. I find that when I'm having discussions with people about stuff like this, they always try to prescribe to either a very liberal approach or like very conservative. And I know people on both sides of the spectrum, and it's really, really hard to try to convince people that, everybody's just trying to survive. That's just my honest opinion. I think refugees are trying to survive, and also the rural poor that want their manufacturing jobs back too. Let me come up with a question out of that, but I just think that you gave a lot of people a lot of things to think about when they try to engage others in debate and honest conversations, because I think it's important to be honest, brutally honest, and face all your bias and hate and stuff. So, yeah, and I could probably show my crazy hick friends who just want steel jobs and oil jobs this movie, and they would probably understand what I'm trying to tell them. So that's really great that you gave the gift of knowledge to me. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you. I think the idea is like I said, to be able to use this. What better way when there's an issue that you want to talk about with someone than to present some kind of, we often send people articles or ask them to read a book. It's usually through that other medium that we're able to engage with someone that is a friend or a family member. And so just like other films, this film can do that, and I appreciate the kind words. That was the idea. That was the idea. The idea was to try to make it so it was a little more palatable for certain people to understand, but also that it's happening now. I think some of your initial thoughts. Look, it's hard for people to understand this. As I said earlier about it being like this esoteric environmental issue. It's not a gun to the head. It's not a stampede of wild elephants. It's not this alarm that's going off that people can deal with. Heidi Collin talks about this beautifully, about how we all have a finite pool of worry. And there's just only so much that we can deal with, right? It's like if I have to worry about my kids' education and my job and paying the mortgage or paying the rent, just right there, I'm zapped. I'm tapped out. What else can I actually deal with? And so I think that it's tough for us to understand this. And I feel like I've gone through phases myself. I'm trying to go through an empathetic phase right now because I have to struggle with my own relationship with this. I was about to fly over and see you guys, and of course inclement weather prevented me from doing that. And we can look into what that means as well in the context of this film, but in some way we're all beneficiaries of cheap fossil fuels. We're all victims, but we're also perpetrators. And there's a lot to absorb there and a lot to talk about. But I think that just presenting this as a national security issue, I mean, obviously it's so much more. It's a health issue, it's an economic issue, it's a moral issue, it's so much more than this, but this way of talking about it, this way of looking at it, I think is helpful. I mean, one of the, I didn't think about it like this until I made the film. If you would have talked to me 2 years ago, I would have been talking about, how we hit 400 parts per million and some of the science about the West Antarctica ice sheet and some of these things, and trying to, that's all I would talk about. That's all I would think about. And what I've realized, I've had the same experience that most moviegoers have had, is that a lot of people, usually every screening, they walk out, they go, I never thought about it like this before, and now I can't stop thinking about it like this. So yeah, I mean, for better or worse, hopefully it doesn't seem too grim, and we throw up our hands and say we can't do nothing. But hopefully we can take that we can arm ourselves with the message and try to go forward.
Yes, hello. I just have a couple short comments and I'd like to ask you a question. First of all, I think you've done an excellent job here portraying the issues. And I just want to thank you for that. I also want to ask you, and I think you may have already suggested it, I know where I came from and how I became aware of all this. I'm lucky to be here and have had family and friends that brought me to this point of understanding. And I think you may have addressed this, but when and where did you become aware of the need to address this? That's my question.
Sure. Bill McKibben was my entry point into really getting involved in trying to understand what I could do, both to educate myself and then to take some kind of action on climate change. I mean, I think I first read his book, The Economy, and then I ended up forming a relationship with Bill and working on 2 films with him, Do the Math and Disruption, in 2013 and 2014. That was, I've also, I was also working on films about partisanship. I've done films on inequality. So I've always, at some point a long time ago, I think this goes hand in hand with me marrying the craft of filmmaking with my desire to shed light on certain social issues, to kind of take what I was reading and experiencing every day in the news and the world and trying to do something about it. And I ended up kind of taking my art and my craft and combining those two. And so, that was kind of the journey. I mean, climate change, it was, no doubt about it, I'm going to be honest with you guys, it's difficult. I mean, we've made 5 films in the last 5 years. I'm pretty burnt out. But I feel like filmmakers have a responsibility. Anyone has a responsibility to some degree. It's up to you to decide. It's not for me to tell you. But the way that I feel is that, I had a responsibility to use my craft to do something other than, make horror films or try to sell shampoo, make commercials and things, which, sadly you have to do in this world sometimes to keep the lights on. But I think the idea of trying to I think become like a messenger, because I don't want to overstate what I do. I don't consider myself an activist. I feel like I'm a messenger. Like I just try to take what's out there and listen, and then figure out how to make it really palatable, digestible, and cinematic for people to experience. It's almost like this stuff exists. I mean, you can find all this stuff online. For example, in the film, you can read these reports. You can, you can watch boring panels. You can see all sorts of things that will tell you exactly what this film tells you. It won't be interesting and it won't be entertaining. And so, as a director, I'm not putting myself in that. I'm trying to interpret the world and understand it just like many of you are. And so, it's been a slow progression. But the last 5 years, I felt like a need, and I think now more than ever, even though I'm drained, I think for reasons that we don't necessarily need to name, I think that we all feel like we probably have to dig down and do a lot more than we were doing already.
Hi. So you mentioned that this film was like an organizing tool for you, and we see a lot of organizing going on today in DC and whatnot. We were just talking about an article in the New York Times about how the Scientist March coming up in March may be considered a poor idea because it may politicize scientists. And that has been argued as one of the reasons we can't have an honest dialogue about climate change. So I wanted to ask you, what were some other organizing tools or techniques other than filmmaking, or how do you envision organizing kind of propelling humanity to address climate change?
Sure, and I think that, and it's also I'm kind of catching just like not the entire picture, but I think I can piece it together. You mentioned climate scientists and maybe what that means when they speak out. I think that Jim Hansen experienced this. I mean, clearly from his work, he felt the need that, he couldn't remain silent, that he also had to take action and be, what you might want to call an activist. And, I think that, there was some scientists that felt that complicated the impartiality that scientists are supposed to have. It's a tough thing, right? Because these scientists are sitting there absorbing all this information and researching this, and their job is to present it. And it goes through a lot of peer reviewing, and it goes through a lot of scrutiny. That is the nature of science. And I think that, when people speak out, and everyone has kind of a mouthpiece now with social media, you wonder, because I mean, on one hand, you feel like, I can understand. I would probably want to say something, but yeah, I think that instead of getting into the weeds on that, it's been tough because scientists haven't been the best, and I think self-admittedly, most of them will tell you this, the best mouthpieces for this issue, for describing this issue. And science doesn't necessarily move us much, right? We're more prone to the emotional world, more so than facts. It's the emotions that are going to move us. So, I think that's when something like, a film comes into play, or other means. I think that there's another part to it that I'm kind of spacing on when you ask me. Apologies, but I think another point I'll say about that is that I think that we have to find better ways of communicating around this issue. No doubt about it. I think that the science is important, that we all need to understand the science. I mean, that forms the baseline for our respective judgments and actions. I mean, look at the military. They respond to data. They respond to facts. That is their job. They are supposed to look at that. Now, obviously, not everyone in the DoD, but there are certain positions where, they need to look at this stuff and they need to understand it. I think the important thing to understand, you probably got this from the film, is that most oftentimes, whether it's a scientist or whether it's the people that are interpreting that science, and in particular those in the film, the Department of Defense, they're usually looking at it just as a risk assessment. The tough thing is all of these people that keep telling us there's a problem and assessing the risk are still saying, well, you got to do something about it. You being us being civil society. This is a problem, civil society. It's not a problem. The thing is, scientists aren't going to fix it. I mean, clearly their studies are going to help us understand it better, but if we don't do anything, if we're not keeping up, and clearly we're not, our action is not keeping up with our understanding of the issue. I mean, as our understanding of the issue increases, all we do is keep accelerating our emissions. It's a strange thing. I mean, we're not slowing that down. You'd think with the accumulation of knowledge and understanding that there would hopefully be a pushback. I mean, we've made some good strides, but we're still far away from where we need to be. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's a tough thing. I don't know the answer on how we're going to get the kind of that mass civic engagement to really move the needle on this issue politically and with popular activism. But I don't know. I don't know. I think we just got to keep trying. I don't know if I might have. If you had another part to that question you want to ask me again, please feel free.
Having recently just studied in Geneva with organizations such as the UN and UNEP, a lot of the emphasis has been put on the Paris talks and how that can be deemed a success/turning point in this talk about climate change. How do you feel states such as the US, along with other leading nations, should move forward from this, possibly implementing the changes suggested in Paris?
Got it. Once again, I'm going to try to piece this together. I think that the crux of that was, what is the role of the U.S. On a global stage, and especially in regards to the Paris Accord and what came about after COP21. I mean, clearly the U.S. has to lead on this issue. I mean, all industrialized countries need to, but the U.S. look, we have a lot of sway. We have a lot of sway in the world, and we also have some of the largest climate debt to pay back. I mean, we have emitted more than any other country in the aggregate. Per capita, we're still the highest as well. I mean, sure, China has passed us for total emissions each year, per year, but we still consume far more per capita than anyone else. That's a problem. I mean, Americans have driven big cars and built up a lot of stuff using cheap fossil fuels, and I think that we have to have the courage and the will to lead. It's tough, right? Because I think of there was a lot of strides that were made with Obama, and I think now you're starting to see a lot of those policies rolled, they're starting to get rolled back. I don't know how that's going to play out. From what I understand, it's going to be hard for this administration to back out to cancel the Paris Accord. I think there's a process there. I think about 3 years. But I think that, look, this is the way that we're ultimately going to have to go. And, I don't know, I hope at some point, I think we often hear the analogy to the space race. And at some point, we're going to have to realize, and hopefully everyone realizes this, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, that if we don't lead on this issue in terms of renewable energy and getting off fossil fuels, then we're going to get stuck and we're going to get left behind. China's going to lead on this, or the rest of Europe is going to lead on this, and it's that same mentality of the space race. I mean, we have to see this too. I mean, it truly is. Hopefully, people start to see this, and Tom Friedman's been talking about this for years, as a patriotic issue. That it's not about being green; it's about red, white, and blue. This is really something that we need to embrace, and then lead on the global stage. But yeah, that's something that look. I know that with the Paris Accord, there's the problem of the emissions gap that I mentioned earlier. I mean, it's great that people have come together. I think it's a fantastic first step. But this is also, God, it took 21 years. I mean, it's good politically, but the way this issue works that's different than other issues is we have physics involved. So it's not like education or healthcare where there's always problems, and politically you move slowly, and there's a lot of unjust things that happen in the process, but you slowly get there, or you hope. With this issue, we have another wild card. Physics doesn't care about politics. And so, I think that we have, and you heard it the last line in the film, Leon Firth, as that plane's flying away, he says, look, it's time. In any defense strategy, time is the most precious resource. It's the one thing that cannot be replenished. It's so true in this case. But yeah, in regards to Paris, I just hope that we maintain our commitments, and I hope that the world, if we don't step up in the next couple of years, the world steams ahead without us and forces us to catch up. And at the same time, it's up to us too. I know it might seem daunting, but we need to apply pressure to our political leaders. I mean, the idea is if enough of us care about this is how democracy is supposed to work. If they don't listen to the will of the people, they're supposed to be voted out. So, we do need to apply pressure. We need to continue to apply pressure. And it's a tough thing, right? Because I think that we all want this single action bias, this one thing that we can do to make ourselves feel like we're doing something. But I see this as a lifelong commitment that's going to play out very slowly until hopefully, as Leon Firth again says, something happens like an avalanche. We don't know when that's going to come, but we just got to keep the pressure on. But yeah, I hope the Paris Accord, I hope that we continue to make gains and to shrink that emissions gap. And if anyone doesn't know what the emissions gap is, it's basically what the world says that we want to do, and then what we're on track to do. Meaning, the world says we need to reduce CO2 to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, right? But we're on track, by most standards to hit 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius. So although countries are saying that they want this, the policies they're putting forward are going to get this. So we need to shrink that and make sure that we stay at 2 degrees.
Mr. Scott, thank you for your sobering, thoughtful, and thought-provoking film here. And it's made me interested to go back and look into some of your prior work. My question is about the network web graphic that you used in each of the chapter introductions and prominently in the chapters themselves. I'm curious if you have a story behind the data points in that web graphic that you can share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned before, a lot of this stuff exists out there on white papers, and our job is to go out there and try to figure out how to bring it to life. We work in a visual medium. So when I was looking over all this stuff with, a lot of the research with our team, we knew that we somehow wanted to visualize the interconnectedness of everything. And, I think as a filmmaker, first, I'm looking for something that already exists. So I was looking for, a risk matrix that the DoD might already use, or some kind of other, some kind of other formula that someone else had already created, maybe at the World Bank or elsewhere, or at, who knows? I mentioned the World Bank because there was a linear thing that we referenced. We came across something that there was a global risk index. I think it was part of the World Economic Forum in 2015 that was close. But either way, we couldn't figure it out. So what we did is we took all these and kind of matched them together and sat down with an animator and said, look, here's what we're trying to do. And then we mapped out all these, all the different, you probably don't see the detail in it, but actually in every different case study, we map out all the different factors. And of course, we only highlight 3, 4, 5 in each case study. But we then proceeded to draw links to those on paper and kind of handed this all over to our animator and said, make this work. And also, make this look cool. And, after some back and forth, we got there. And, I think that it's important, right? Because I think that in any kind of film like this, you're dealing with it's kind of an essay film. It's a subject-based film. So, we're kind of educated. We're kind of trying to present a thesis, and we're trying to tell a really heavier story and try to make it light and palatable. One of the things that helps, well, clearly you have to make it just clear. You have to make it make sense. But yeah, when you bring in a visual, and you can't just make it just look cool. You have to also have it make sense. So, we were able then to, once it was really clearly defined, because when you hand an animator something, you got to make sure that they're basically animating the picture the way a composer does. They need to know exactly what they're doing. And yeah, it was a pleasure to see this come to life, because you should have seen me trying to describe this before it existed. I looked like a madman. If I could show you the whiteboard drawings, I think that everyone thought I was kind of crazy. But yeah, we ended up calling it the Nexus, and it somehow ended up working. And I think it's an important through line, because at the end of the day, you have to understand that it's not just climate change is the biggest threat to our national security. You can't go out and say that. You have to say it's how climate change interacts with all these other socio-political factors. That's the problem. That's what's happened. And that's what we needed to show over and over again.
So, Jared, thank you so much. Everyone wave to Jared. Thank you. It was awesome. And you again tomorrow at the lunch. But thanks again, and stay safe in the storm.
Thanks so much. Thank you for coming out and watching the film, guys. I really do appreciate it. It doesn't happen enough with documentary films. So also thank you to Angie, thank you to Wooster, thank you for supporting the film, and it'll be out there digitally soon. So it'll keep running the theaters, and it'll be out there on iTunes and Amazon, and then on a cable distributor that I'm not able to mention yet. That will even get it in front of more and more eyeballs. So remember to spread the word. Find us online, like us on Facebook, and Twitter, and help us spread the word.